Hello. Today we're going to take this generic quadratic equation and we are going to solve for x by completing the square. We just did completing the square last time, so hopefully you remember how this is done. The first thing that we're going to do is get rid of this c. We need this to go away right there. Okay, we're going to be left with ax squared plus bx. We'll leave our big space equals negative c. Okay, the next thing we need to worry about is we're not allowed to complete the square with any coefficient in front of x squared other than 1. So I'm going to divide everything by a. That leaves me with x squared plus b over a times x, with our big space still in there, equals negative c over a. Okay? Now, to do our completing the square work, this is where we wanted to, we're going to do our half of b squared. So I want to do b over a. Half of that, dividing this by 2 is the same as multiplying it by a half. So I'm going to take a half of this, and then I'm going to square the result. So I get b over 2a, that's what's being squared, which is the same as b squared over 4a squared. Remember, when you square the top of a fraction, and you square everything on the bottom of the fraction as well. So it's going to be a plus b squared over 4a squared. I'm going to add that on both sides. So now we, on the left side, factor this expression into some quantity to the second power. Now x times x is x squared, so the front's going to be x. Everything in here is positive, so it's a plus. And now what multiplies by itself to make b squared over 4a squared? Well, if you remember, it's always the same thing as what's in that set of parentheses up there. So it's going to be b over 2a. Okay, on the other side, we want to combine like terms here. We want to combine these into one thing. And in order to add fractions, we need a common denominator. Well, this one here has 4a squared, whereas this one just has an a. So this side is definitely going to need a 4, and it's also going to need a second a in order to make the bottom 4a squared. So this is going to turn into, on the top, negative c times 4a is a minus 4ac. On the bottom, a times 4a is 4a squared. Still adding to b squared over 4a squared. And let's combine those now. So I'll rewrite this over here, x plus b over 2a, quantity squared, equals, and then when I add the fractions, if you remember, I just add the top, so I'll rewrite this so that the b squared comes first, b squared minus 4ac all over 4a squared. Okay? The next step on this, the next step that we're going to take is to square root both sides. So let's square root both sides. And remember, the one side not containing the x gets a plus or minus. So over here, we're going to get x plus b over 2a equals plus or minus. Now the top is not a perfect square. So the top will stay in the square root of b squared minus 4ac. But the bottom is a perfect square. And this really helps us out, actually, so we don't have to rationalize our denominator. The square root of 4 becomes 2. The square root of a squared just becomes a. It's actually really nice. And then the final step here, let's subtract b over 2a on both sides. Another nice thing about this, they already have a common denominator. So when I write this, I get x equals, I'll put the negative b first, plus or minus the square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a.